Hey everyone, this week we get to talk about two very fun aspects of visual media, typography and photography. First, we are going to cover photography. We'll be focusing on three principles of photography. First, depth of field, which is how much of your photo is in focus. Second, rule of thirds, a composition rule for well-balanced photos. And third, leading lines, lines in a photo that move the eye through the photo. Let's start with depth of field. Your readings this week really didn't cover this very thoroughly. And as said before, depth of field is how much of your photo is in focus. With a deep depth of field, everything or almost everything in the photo is in focus, no matter how far or how close the camera an object is. As you can see in this picture here, everything's in focus, from the close road to the distant mountain. In contrast, with shallow depth of field, only part of the photo is in focus and the rest is blurred out. In the photo on the right, only flowers at a certain distance are in focus and the rest are blurred. You can mimic shallow depth of field using portrait mode on a phone, or if you don't have a phone with portrait mode, you can position something very close to the camera with a background or background objects that are further away, and your phone will usually adjust to a shallow depth of field naturally. If you have an actual camera and would like help using aperture to adjust your depth of field, please let me know. You can just email me and I'd be happy to help. Next, we have rule of thirds. Again, this is a composition rule for well-balanced photos. To use the rule of thirds in your photography, you should imagine the photo divided equally into a 3x3 grid. Then you want to place the focus of the photograph along one of those lines. Like the dog on the left, his head is at the top right intersection of those lines. On the right, we have a landscape photo. For landscape photos, it's really nice to try to have the horizon line along one of the rule of thirds lines as shown here. And finally, we have leading lines. The name is pretty self-explanatory here. To utilize leading lines in a photo, position your camera or subject so there will be lines in the photo leading to that subject. These lines can be straight or they can be curved. On the left, the lines of the bridge lead straight to the girl, as shown with the red drawover. This pulls your eye to her. On the right, the lines of the river lead the viewer's eye through the photo to the mountain, which is the subject. Leading lines are a great way to create a sense of motion in your photos. Now that we've covered some photography basics, let's transition to typography. First, let's discuss the categories of type. Up first, we have old style. Old style is a specific subcategory of serif typography. It has serifs or strokes at the edges or ends of the letters. As you can see, there is a gradual change from thick to thin on the serifs. This is a great classic type of font that can be used in all sorts of applications. However, it's especially used well with older audiences and formal and professional uses, like wedding invitations, for example. Old style fonts are also generally very easy to read, so they're a good choice for large amounts of text, like paragraphs. Next, we have modern type. Modern type may look like old style at first. That's because they both have serifs. Unlike old style type, modern type has horizontal or flat serifs rather than slanted ones. Beyond that, the serifs are very thin. As a result, modern type is seen as cold, elegant, and striking. Because modern type is so stylized, it is not ideal for large amount of text, such as paragraphs. And finally, we have our last category of serif text that we're going to talk about, and that is slab serif. As the name suggests, slab serif fonts are a bit blockier than other serif fonts. They have little to no thick to thin transition. This category of type is easy to read, even from a far distance. However, it is not often used for body copy or paragraphs of text, besides in media aimed at children. Next, we're transitioning to sans serif type. The word sans means without in French. So sans serif typefaces are those without serifs on the ends of the strokes. Sans serif type usually has the same thickness throughout the letters with no thick to thin transitions. Sans serif fonts are great in a variety of applications. They can look a bit more clean and modern than serif text, and they are easily read and work well for paragraphs of text, especially when viewed digitally, like on a website. Now for a fun one, we have script. Script fonts are any fonts that can look handwritten as if they were done with a calligraphy pen. They are very stylized and have a wide range of appearance. Here we have some that are more traditional and some that are more playful. They're very stylized and, again, can be used in all sorts of projects and applications. Script text is a bit difficult to read and should never be used for large amounts of text. If you ever do use a script font, use it very sparingly and with very careful consideration. And last of all, we have decorative fonts. These fonts are the most stylized fonts of all. Many decorative fonts have very specific applications where they would be appropriate. Generally, many graphic designers avoid decorative fonts in almost all situations. They are difficult to read oftentimes, and in general should never be used for large amounts of text, like paragraphs. I finally want to discuss the difference between categories, typefaces, and fonts, because I know it can be confusing. Categories are the 6 broad groups of fonts we just discussed. For example, here below we have a sans serif font. A typeface is sometimes called a family of fonts. In a typeface, there are some variables between the different fonts. Here we have thin variations, bold variations, and also oblique or italic variations. All of these together make up the typeface of the font family. Each of these family members is a specific font. So there you have it, the difference between type categories, typefaces, and fonts. The last topic I want to cover in this week's video is pairing fonts. This is a crucial aspect of typography. Chapter 12 in your book covers this very well, but I do want to emphasize some important aspects of pairing fonts. Here are 6 ways you can create contrast in your font pairing, as well as some examples of each. We have size, such as big and little, weight, thick and thin, structure, sans serif and old style, form, lowercase and capitals or Roman and italic, direction, vertical and horizontal, and of course, color. One important thing that the book talks about when pairing fonts is when it comes to pairing fonts and creating contrasting typography, don't be a wimp. Make your contrast obvious. If you choose fonts that are too similar, you will have visual conflict. So let's look at some examples. First, let's pair Rockwell. On the left, we've paired it with Charter. With this pairing, there's not an obvious enough contrast in structure. We have slab serif and serif, but those two are really similar. We don't have enough contrast in color. We have charcoal and black, and then size. There's slightly different sizes, but not enough to make it obvious. Now, in contrast, we have Mr. Eves and Rockwell. Here we have obvious contrast in structure because we're pairing a slab serif with the sans serif. We also have obvious contrast in color with the pink and the navy. Form with all lowercase and all capitals. And then also with weight, we're pairing a thicker font with a thinner font. Let's try it one more time, this time with lemongrass. Again, on the left, pairing it with Georgia Italic, we do not have enough contrast in the structure. We have a script and an italic serif, which can both look like script fonts. The colors are too similar. They're both orange toned. They're too similar in size. They're just, again, slightly different sizes. And again, in weight, they're slightly different weights. So these two fonts are too similar to pair well together. They don't have enough differences to make it interesting. On the right, we have a much better font pairing. We have obvious contrast in structure with a script and a sans serif, color with an orange and a black, size with a small font and a large font, and weight. We have very thin paired with a thicker font. Choosing a font is not about what looks good. Really, you want to focus on fonts that look good and can help communicate a message. So when you're choosing a font, ask yourself, do the typefaces I have chosen attract my chosen target audience? Do the typefaces I have chosen strengthen my message or distract from it? And finally, do the typefaces I have chosen have adequate contrast or do they conflict? One more thing I want to talk about is blacklisted fonts. You can see some of the blacklisted fonts here, and essentially these are fonts that graphic designers avoid. These fonts are either so overused that they've become cliche, or they have such a specific look to them that they really just stick out too much. Please do not use these fonts in your designs. All right, let's talk about the due dates for this week. You have a quiz on type and photography. For the typography questions, you need to first read chapters 9 through 12 in the non-designer's design book. For photography questions, you have a variety of web resources to read through before you take the quiz. Remember, you can only take the quiz once, and you have to take it within 2 hours of starting it. So you can't leave and come back and finish it. You can take it all at once. For your second due date, you will be doing another reverse engineer post, similar to your last one. For this, you will be analyzing a magazine spread. You can find an e-magazine spread online to analyze, or I think one of the best ways to do this assignment is to even take a picture of a printed magazine spread and analyze that. It can be a church magazine, it can be a fashion magazine. It really is up to you as long as you meet the requirements. You also will be taking your own pictures for your blog post, so be sure that you devote enough time to that this week. Also, be sure that you submit your final reverse engineer post both as a link and as a PDF. Those are easy points to get, so be sure you get those points. And as always, please feel welcome to email me at hiller@byui.edu or message me in Canvas with any questions you have.